All right, my friend Dave, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Seems like we end up together doing these type things on a somewhat consistent basis, speaking with each other to groups about entrepreneurship. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Be a slightly different spin from some of the startups we've looked at, coming
Right.
from your direction, from the educator standpoint. But I'm excited for people to hear what you're doing at the University of Tennessee for the students and those type things. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background? Get us started.
So, a little bit about my background. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and that was kind of where I started to get hooked into entrepreneurship. I didn't realize it at the time, but my dad had worked for a number of large companies and then eventually decided to start his own business. And meanwhile, I was going to school and doing those things and went out and got jobs. And eventually, as I worked my way back into becoming an academic, the whole idea of entrepreneurship really kind of took center stage for me. And so as I went out and did my PhD and came back and took a job here at UT, that idea of entrepreneurship and what entrepreneurs do and how they do it has always kind of been center stage. And so that's what I do here.
What type of businesses did your family or your father have?
So my dad actually had an appraising business. And so he had been through a number of things. That was really a big right turn for him in terms of the kinds of things he had been doing before, which is really much more in the financial area. So there was a little bit of a link in terms of appraising, but the whole real estate focus was brand new for him.
Yeah, interesting. So just the other day, I interviewed Brian from Funnel Pro, and he sort of came from the same path, right? So it seems his entrepreneurship stemmed from watching his father go through all these things,
Right.
and I myself recently lost my father, but I sort of got intrigued by this idea of entrepreneurship from watching all of his endeavors that he did, and what I'm hearing is a pretty consistent story. I'm curious, before we talk about the program, if you hear the same, is you mentioned sort of the idea of him doing maybe lots of different things, and it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs, that's sort of the standard for them. It's not that they find
Right.
their one thing right away and they go, that's the business I'm going to do. It's that I don't mean it in a bad way because I do it, maybe they
Right.
piddle a little bit or they try out
Right.
different things and then finally something sticks. Did you experience that same thing within your father's, or see that within your father's business as well?
Absolutely. I mean, looking at it now as an academic and trying to see those different paths that entrepreneurs take, this is definitely one path that's very consistent, that some people just try out lots of different things until they find that thing that really clicks. And that was certainly the case for him.
Yeah, and so as part of your PhD, was it a focus on entrepreneurship? Did I catch that right?
It was. And so much of my research in the PhD program had to do with entrepreneurship and continues to be focused that way.
Maybe we could pause there for a minute, and if you can, pull up some sort of standard things you saw in your studies along the way. I mean, what did you seem to uncover with entrepreneurship and all of that research?
So a lot of what I look at in the research on the entrepreneurship side has to do with how entrepreneurs decide which opportunity is right for them. And so this kind of ties right into the conversation.
Yeah.
And for some, they know right away. And it's a process of validating that and then going out into the marketplace and making sure others agree with that validation. But for others, it's really a trial and error. They see something that's interesting, it doesn't work. They try something else, it doesn't work. And eventually they find their way back to something that actually makes sense for them.
So is it just a matter of sort of, we always hear this and it's so cliche, but I think it's important for people to hear. Is it just a matter of sort of sticking with these different attempts, and not necessarily one attempt, but continuing to try new things, learning new skills, learning how to implement them and try new things, and then finally something goes, that's the thing?
Absolutely. That notion of trying new things is really important because it's hard to predict ahead of time which one of those things is going to be the one that kind of catapults you, moves you forward. And it's usually the unexpected one that ends up doing that. And so if you're not trying those new things, you really don't know which one is going to be the one that suddenly is what works for you.
So a lot of the research you've done, you've noticed that it sounds like people are, falling into might be the wrong term, but that they sort of keep trying different things, fail, move on to new ones, and then you mentioned it was the unexpected one. So it really is sometimes this idea of something that I didn't expect to hit is going to.
There's a real serendipity with that. And so, I always like to think about it in terms of different paths that folks might take. Some people, they go into an industry, they get deep knowledge there, and they start their venture based on the deep knowledge they have. And in that case, it's somewhat predictable. For others, this notion of serendipity and finding the unexpected is really what triggers the right venture for
Mm.
them that ends up being the one that they start and have some success with.
Have you noticed, is there a catalyst moment when they recognize that that's the thing, or is it maybe a slow build over time, or maybe a combination even?
I've seen some of both. Some people that automatically recognize that they're like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? And so the cliche as well, but that kind of eureka moment that they
Sure.
figure it out. Whereas others, it's a little bit backward looking, where they realize, well, that's where things really turned for me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I see it now.
And one more question on this, if I can, because
Yeah,
you really piqued my interest. I love in this conversation. Is it sometimes I talk to people about this idea of not discovering who you are, but rediscovering who you are, rediscovering
right,
your skills that you've forgotten
right.
about. Is there a component of that in this entrepreneurship journey for people?
No doubt about it. We were working with an entrepreneur not too long ago where it was exactly that. I mean, he kind of went back to something that he had been very happy with 15, 20 years ago, but had kind of lost it along the way. And that turned out to be the catalyst for him that allowed him to move forward and say, kind of all along, I should have known that this is what I should be doing, but I just lost sight of it. And once I rediscovered that, that's kind of where he made real progress and was able to go and get started.
Very cool stuff. Well, I could talk about this forever, but I'd love to give you a chance to talk about the program. So, finished your PhD already, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I finished that in 2010, and then that's when I joined UT.
Okay, so you joined the university back then, and then you were teaching undergraduate classes for a while there.
Yeah, and so I've taught mostly in the undergraduate program. I also teach some doctoral level courses
Okay.
in entrepreneurship for our PhDs that we're graduating. But the undergraduate level is, I think, where we're having the most impact on our students and on the ecosystem here in East Tennessee.
And you've got the new program that the university has launched with your help and a couple of others involved in it, right?
Yeah, so we've got a great group of folks here that we put together 2 or 3 years ago now, an entrepreneurship minor. And the really core parts of that minor was that's across the entire campus. Sometimes business schools tend to take ownership of entrepreneurship as if it's theirs and nobody else's.
Right.
But that makes absolutely zero sense in terms of who entrepreneurs are and where they come from and what disciplines might be most suited or interested in entrepreneurship. And so the minor is across the entire university. It doesn't matter what your major is. You can take the courses in entrepreneurship. And so if you're a design major, if you're a chemist, if you're an engineer, it doesn't matter. Everybody has access to the coursework. Anybody can take the minor. And so right now we've got courses from 7 colleges, and I think nearly 30 total courses that encompass the minor, recognizing that everybody's path is going to be a little bit different. Everybody's skill set and what they want to learn is going to be a little bit different. And so it enables them to build that path that makes the most sense for them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm sure the students love having this type of choice. Are you noting a particular reason that the students take the class? Is that something you delve into with them? I mean, what piqued, asking them what piqued your interest about this class specifically? Because I know you've been kind enough to have me speak at the class a couple of times, and I always ask the question, who here intends to be an entrepreneur when they're finished with school? And you kind of get less people that are going that entrepreneur route. So have you asked them, is there a particular reason they're into it?
Absolutely. So we ask that every semester just to see if things are changing. But for the most part, it's been consistent. There's kind of 3 groups of students that take the coursework. The first group are those that have already started a venture. There's plenty of dorm room businesses going on around campus. And maybe they're involved in their family business back home as well. And so they're taking it because they have a real interest in taking the things that we're teaching them and applying it right away to the businesses that they have. And so that's the first group, but it's the smallest group. It's maybe 10% of the students. We have another group that thinks that this is really what they want to do for their career. This generation is very entrepreneurial, and so they're trying to think about how they can develop that career. And so they're taking it to find out, is this really for me? Does entrepreneurship make sense for me? And then we have a third group that is really interested in the idea of entrepreneurship, but they don't know very much about it. And so they're really just taking it to learn what it is. Could this be something for me? And that's the group that's much more likely to go out, take a job, work for a while, and then maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the road, they've kind of got that entrepreneurial bug, and then they go out and start that business.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I think it's important to note for the listener that it's that taking an entrepreneurial minor or even MBA or something like that doesn't necessarily mean that. Often it does that individual is probably going to go out and start their own business of some sort. But I think it's important to pause and note that, in my opinion, and hopefully you would echo this, that the skill set they learn can apply even in the corporate world. I always talk about, applying an entrepreneurial mindset even inside a company that you work for. Do you find that's true for the students?
That's 100% true. And we really talk about that message all the time because we talk to employers to find out, just broadly, what do you want from our undergraduates, whether they take entrepreneurship or not? And really having people that can be entrepreneurial in their careers, be entrepreneurial within that company is really important. There's not enough people like that in most companies. And employers really love that skill set.
Yeah, so I imagine they do. It usually benefits the company. At least I would like to hope so.
Yes.
So that's fantastic to hear. What about so what does the course look? What do the courses or coursework look like at this stage?
And so without getting kind of into the nuts and bolts of course names and numbers, which is too much in the minutia, really what we try to do is we have a couple of core courses that are designed to teach very specific skill sets. And so the first course that everybody's required to take, the main focus is to get them out of the building. One problem that many entrepreneurs have is that they're so convinced that they're right that they don't go and they test what they're trying to do.
Yes.
And I think undergrads are perhaps more susceptible to this than others. Their enthusiasm is both their biggest strength and their biggest weakness. And so forcing them out of the building to go talk to their customers and find out what do the people really think. And so for those who are fans of the movie Field of Dreams, I always use the analogy, if you build it, will they come?
Right.
And most of the time, they're 100% convinced that if they build it, they will come. And that learning that takes place when they go out and they realize that that's not true, or that they have to make some significant changes. So that's really what that first course is about, is to force them out of the building, learn what their market really thinks about their idea, and whether or not it could be a successful business, or how they might have to start pivoting that business to make it.
Pure and utter validation, basically.
Exactly.
We should note, by talking to the customer, not your best friend or roommate or mom or somebody like that.
Exactly.
So that was a deliberate decision to make that the first course they literally have to go through. How did you guys get to that point? I know you're all very experienced, the faculty and other folks that come and speak. How did you get to that realization that this is what has to happen first, otherwise there's nowhere other path to go?
I can take zero credit for that. That was in place when I came here, and so Tom Graves and some of the other faculty that were here, they were really the key in terms of putting that in place, because they recognized that when they started the entrepreneurship program here, that without going out and validating the idea, that really none of the rest of it matters. If it's not a workable idea, it doesn't matter what else you do. And so they had the foresight to do that before I even joined the faculty.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And so when they go out, they're doing this validation. Is there, not necessarily to the T, but any statistics off the top of your head, the number that come back and have to make that pivot that you're talking about, where they're finding out it's not exactly what I thought? I would imagine it's pretty high.
I don't have the exact number, so I'll kind of make up a rough estimate.
Sure.
But I'd say it's 75 to 80%, and even within that 80 to 20% that's left, they might be making small changes, but usually those are the ones that have actually started and they've done enough work. They have customers already that they've done some of those iterations already before they even started the class. Most of the ones that are starting out with the idea brand new in the class, the original version never survives contact with the customer, right? And so the vast majority of those find that they have to do something at least a little bit, if not radically different.
Sure. And so what follows on with, so back to this idea of coming up with a business that they have to work on. You said some of them are showing up with it already in mind. What types of businesses do you tend to see? I imagine it crosses borders, but is there any patterns there as well?
Not really. It is across the board. And this, I think, is a real strength of the fact that we're bringing in students from just about every discipline on campus, is that they have ideas that span anything. It can be technology businesses, they can be service businesses. It's really a lot of fun to see the kinds of things that they come up with. So there's not a lot of patterns there. And so that's why we kind of try to look at the process. What can we teach them about how to validate better, to make sure that whatever idea that they've come up with, have they figured out the core things that matter for that particular business? If it's an internet business, do they understand what it's going to take to get customers and what that cost is going to be, and can they keep those customers once they've gotten them? Right. And it's not just a matter of saying, oh, we're going to go viral on social media because that's really easy to do, right? So
You beat me to it. I mean, that's
yeah.
the thing you always hear, or I always see in any business plan or pitch competition. And I just saw it last week from someone that asked for my opinion on a plan. That's, the first thing I looked at was marketing. It was like, oh, we're going to
Right.
use social media, and it's because it's inexpensive, and they think,
Yeah.
we're going to go viral. And you're right, it doesn't happen. So,
In fact, we planned a particular course focused on entrepreneurial marketing specifically because every year, every semester, we saw that as their marketing plan. Oh, we'll use social media. Our generation's big into social media. We understand it. And so we'll use it and we'll go viral. And that was the entirety of the marketing
that's
plan.
it.
So we said, yeah, this is not going to work. We need a deeper dive into this.
And so past that first course, is it all electives after that point, or how does that work?
There's one other required course that really has to do with putting the business model together.
Okay.
And so once you have an idea that you know that it's going to work, how do you put all those pieces in place? And so, some people are familiar with the business model canvas. That's certainly one approach that we take. I always use the analogy of it's a giant puzzle, and how do you put all those pieces of the puzzle together for a coherent whole? And that's what that second course is really designed to do. You have a validated idea that that can work in the marketplace. Now let's see if we can get all the other pieces. Do we get the right partners together? What does the financing look like? Which things are you going to keep as core to your business, and which things might you outsource? All of those pieces are the things that will be talked about in that second course.
Okay, and then from there, electives and
from there,
wide variety of topics, finance, accounting, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. A wide variety of, in some, I mean, many of them are in the business disciplines, but also outside. We have entrepreneurship courses in engineering. We've got a new one that's being developed in the College of Communications. We have design courses, design thinking courses to kind of get them to be using that skill set. So it's really a wide set of courses.
And something else I just remembered is that you're very adamant about the students networking, particularly when speakers come in and speak to the group. You always encourage them at the end, hey, come up, shake a hand, get to know somebody. Could you talk about the importance of that for these students and just business in general, and why you promote it?
Yeah, really what we find is that a lot of our students have the belief that even though they're always told to network, they think that they can develop the network when they need it. And that's one of the things that we really push them to understand, that you need to develop the network now so that when you need it, it's already in place and you can use that network to maximum effect. That they don't know today who they're going to need to know tomorrow.
Exactly.
And so one of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is many of the students didn't even have a LinkedIn account, for example, even though they were on Twitter, they were on Facebook, they were on Snap, but they weren't on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's for us old guys.
It is.
They think.
But us old guys are the ones that they usually need to get in contact with.
Exactly.
In terms of getting their business moving and finding the right partners. And so we really encourage them to do that. In fact, we even have an assignment now that we make them create a LinkedIn profile, use a professional picture, which is sometimes more challenging than we'd like to believe, and then start to build that network, whether it's just with their classmates, whether it's with their professors. Anytime there's an outside speaker that comes in, connect with that person. And so they're starting to build the network now so that hopefully they have at least part of it in place when they realize that, oh, I need to find this person who could be my CTO, or at least try to network into finding who that CTO might be, that they've already started to build that network now and not try to do it all when they absolutely need it, when it's almost impossible to do.
Sure. No, it's great advice, and it's true for students or other existing professionals in and of itself. It's just the value of your network and establishing it now. I love your comment about you never know who you're going to need to know in the future. I will say that some of the students have been very deliberate about even reaching out to me after the fact and saying, hey, this whole "can I buy you coffee" idea, which I always insist I buy theirs because they're students, but can I buy you coffee and just pick your brain and those type of things. And I've made some really great contacts through that myself, so it's been phenomenal. I think it'd be great if we talked a minute about, I know it's not specifically inside the program, but it relates to it, the pitch competition, Vol Court.
Yeah. And so we've actually got 3 different competitions on campus. And so the Vol Court is the one that we just finished up, which is a series of informational sessions. It's available to anybody in the community.
Right.
And so that's what's unique about that one. And so we go through a series of informational sessions about kind of different aspects of entrepreneurship, finding your idea, marketing it, validating it, all of the kind of core topics. And then it culminates in the pitch competition. And that has both a financial reward as well as in-kind services. I don't recall this year if it was both legal and accounting, but often those are the two that we
Sure.
focus on. And so the Vol Court's one. The other two that we have, one is only for undergraduates, and that's a business plan competition that I think we just closed on Friday. We're going to start reviewing those soon. And then the third one is for any students on campus, and I know that might not be your prime audience here, but that's the Boyd Venture Fund.
Right.
And that was one that was seeded by Randy Boyd some years ago, and it's designed for student businesses, undergraduate, master's, doctoral, doesn't matter, who have an already existing business and they need some money to meet some milestone. They need to go look for getting that intellectual property, filing that patent. They need to get a prototype, some milestone that this financial, that this money would help them to do. And so that we do that every semester as well. And I think that'll be not closing for a few weeks now.
Yeah, all great programs. I would tell you that a lot of past guests have talked about the pitch opportunities in the community, and most of them do revolve, or quite a few have mentioned either Boyd Venture Challenge or Vol Court. The new one, what are you calling it? Or newer one? I saw it. It's through the Anderson Center, correct? Or do I have it wrong?
I'm not sure which newer one are you thinking of?
I thought I saw one that was through the Anderson Center, but I can't even remember. I just saw an image of it on LinkedIn or Facebook. Anyhow, it's
It may have been, we renamed the undergraduate business plan competition. It was renamed after Tom Graves. We had
that's it. I'm sorry.
Anonymous donor.
Tom.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's wonderful. We had an anonymous donor who said, we want this to continue indefinitely. It's a great program, but they wanted that Tom be recognized because he's really the one that built the entrepreneurship program, built a lot of these competitions, and just wanted it to bear his name. And so it was a wonderful honor for Tom, but also wonderful that we now know that we have the funding to continue that program indefinitely.
Yeah, like I said, they're all making a difference in people, in people's opportunities and things like that. So great programs. If we could switch gears, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it cycles back to the networking as well. It's kind of the hidden benefit that you get a chance to meet a lot of other entrepreneurs. You get to meet the panelists and the judges who come from many walks of life. They're professionals, they're entrepreneurs. And so, even for those who don't win, they usually find that they've met some people along the way who can be incredibly helpful as they continue to develop their venture.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, back to the value of that network. It's probably one of the best skills I ever acquired. One of my mentors, Dan Rawls, really teaching me how to network. Probably one of the best things I ever learned to do. It made a huge difference in my career, profession, and just life in general, making lots of really good friends through it. So it's a great thing. I wanted to switch gears for a minute, and I usually ask entrepreneurs, what's the toughest part and the hardest part for you? I wonder if you could maybe aggregate some of the experiences you're seeing from these students and give us an idea. I mean, what seems to be the hardest thing for them to deal with? Is it maybe that validation or keeping going, motivated? What are you seeing?
So actually, the hardest thing for students today is that this group is very entrepreneurial, but they have a very hard time starting ventures. In fact, the Wall Street Journal published an article maybe a year and a half ago calling the young entrepreneur an endangered species. And so I always bring that up and say, well, why are you an endangered species? And one of the things that always comes up is that today's undergraduates have a ton of student loan debt.
Yes.
They finish college, and so they don't feel like they have the opportunity to go out and start businesses when they're under this mountain of debt. And obviously it varies from student to student.
Sure.
But on average, it's probably the hardest thing that they have to overcome. And without getting too much into policy, it's something that we're going to have to think about as a society, whether or not this is a sustainable model and whether or not we're hurting our ability to create new, innovative, young entrepreneurs as a result of it. So it's an unintended consequence of the student loan programs, which were put in to create access to education,
right?
But certainly are not helping young entrepreneurs with their aspirations to start businesses.
So it's slowing them down in general just for the income opportunities and having to pay for these debts. Is there any portion of them, or have you experienced, it's just sort of a not personal question, but personal thought that I've had, any portion of them that are deciding to stay corporate because they feel like they have greater income opportunities there or benefits? Is there any portion of that that's driving that decision too, setting aside any debt they may have?
There certainly is that some of them feel that the opportunity is greater there, but usually those are students that are really more on the interest in entrepreneurship,
Gotcha.
but not sure that they're quite ready for it, and so they're already kind of primed to their goal was to go through their time in college and then go out and get a job with somebody else. I haven't seen too many entrepreneurs that in the course that really wanted to be an entrepreneur, yet kind of got seduced by the salary packages.
Sure.
The ones that were really committed, they stayed true.
Okay, so they're really the ones that you see are coming through that seem to be, this is the route they are definitely going to go, tend to stick with it. Well, that's really great to hear. They're not backing down from the challenge or being discouraged by the amount of effort it's going to take for the most part. That's great to hear. What seems to be the best part for them? I mean, the easiest part for them.
That's a good question, and I'm struggling with the answer for it because it's a little bit different for everyone.
Yeah.
For some, when they've got that idea that they come into the class already and they've had some customers, being able to then talk to their other classmates and to go out when they do the validation and they do realize that they've done all these things right already. Mm-hmm. They just feel so good about what they've already accomplished and the fact that they've done. In many cases, with very little training, they just kind of figured it out on their own.
Right.
They're just so excited that everything was kind of working, and so that's probably the part that's the most interesting.
Yeah, that's great to hear because that's another common theme I'm hearing when I ask other entrepreneurs that aren't in school anymore that same question. For instance, I had Tony Bova on from Grow Bioplastics, and that was one of the things he kept reiterating to me was this idea of I got to build something, I got to make something, and then the marketplace validated it. And just the feeling that gave him is really what kept him going over and over and over.
Exactly.
That, yes, I'm not the only one that sees this. One other person understands what I'm going through. So you get to see that in the students too.
Absolutely. Every week, it's one of the best parts of my job is when you see that excitement when, even if they go out and they're validating and things don't go the way they plan, but then they can fix it and they can change it to something that works. And then they go talk to new people. And the consumer gets excited about it, and then they come back and they're so happy that happened. And that's one of the most fun parts about my job.
Awesome. So, in wrapping up, what's next for the program? Anything on the horizon?
Right now, I think growth is what's next on the program. And so I think probably in terms of the scope of courses, we're probably about where we need to be in terms of providing everybody access and opportunity. And now it's just a matter of we've gotten a lot of early adopters. But we haven't yet reached that really good growth phase. We're in the early parts of that. And so continuing to grow the program and make sure that any student that's interested in entrepreneurship on campus knows that it exists and starts thinking ahead of time. It's always difficult to find room for any new coursework in student schedules. But so knowing that they have that opportunity right when they walk in the door so they can plan for it if it's what excites them.
Very cool. Well, listen, I know you pour your heart into these students, so for all of them collectively, I just want to say well done. Great job over all the years, and I know you're going to continue to do more, so fantastic. All the things yourself and others on the team are doing for these students. I think sometimes it's hard to see the impact that you're making on them, but I know, down the road, sometimes they'll stop and they'll think about what you guys did for them. That's happening. Like you said, you don't always get that, like an entrepreneur, you don't always get that immediate validation, but you know that the impact is there. And if we weren't passionate about it, we wouldn't do it. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, and look forward to hearing more in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.